What are we looking at?
Good evening. Today is January 8th. It is 6 p.m. I'd like to call the meeting of the Agriculture Advisory Board to order. First item of business is a moment of silence. Thank you. Mr. Blanton, would you please lead us in our invocation?
Yes, sir. Let's bow in prayer. Dear Heavenly Father, thank you for this day. Thank you for all our many blessings. Thank you for all the attendees tonight. Just bless us and help us to do what you would have us to do to improve Oconee County and to improve the citizens and the lifestyle here and support agriculture, preserve agriculture, natural resources. Just help us to plan effectively and do good things for your benefit and benefit of Oconeans. And we ask all these things in your name. Amen.
Mr. Owens, would you please lead us in the pledge?
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Next item of business is the approval of the minutes from the December 11th meeting. Everybody had a chance to review those? I need a motion.
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes as submitted by Ms. Moxley.
I'll say.
Thank you. Any further discussion, changes, omissions, corrections? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? It's unanimous. Next order of business is our election of officers. We will hear nominations for the role of chair.
I would like to nominate Ms. Kim Alexander as the continued chair for the Ag Board.
Would you like to accept?
Also,
Great. Any other nominations? Hearing none, is there any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? It's unanimous. So Alexander, hand the meeting over to you.
That was good.
Yeah, do I do it right?
Yes. 0, it's 100%.
100%. Still nothing. Great. In the backup material.
So we'll do the vice chair and the secretary.
Oh, okay. So sorry, I forgot that. Okay. So, do I have any nominations for vice chair for the Agricultural Advisory Board?
nominate Rick.
Second that.
Any other nominations? If not, all in favor of Rex being our vice chair, signify by raising your hand.
Aye.
Unanimous. The next is our secretary who does our minutes. I would like to nominate Tessa Moxley, as she has been doing a fantastic job for the past several years, keeping us in line and keeping us up to date.
Second.
Any other nominations? All in favor of Tessa continuing? So we need to approve our calendar dates. We kind of did this tentatively last meeting, but just to make it formal since it is 2024. Next month, we will be going to District 5, which is Charlie's meeting, and then back here for the March 11th meeting. Rex will be going to District 3 on April the 8th. Back here on the 13th of May. June, Josh will be coming to District 4. And back here in July, District 2, Tessa, Nate, and Trent, we will be coming to District 2, so you guys can decide. Thought the Mountain Rest spot was great, but if y'all want to switch it around, that'd be fine too.
That's August.
August. September, we'll be back here, and that's really the Heritage Fair, so I don't know if you guys want to look at taking something out of here for that, or have it here and make sure we promote the Heritage Fair. I think we need to try to help the Fair Board and the Ag Center Board with that. October will be District 1, so we will have that, and then November and December, those meetings, the November meeting will actually be the 14th, that's open here, and December is open here as well. Any of these we can change, and we have discussed really pushing education and trying to do something with the economic and development. And that is why we were going to, have Dr. Kantrovich here today. I know that I need a motion to approve the calendar though, first, before we move on, so if I
So
could.
move.
Okay,
Second.
second, all in favor? Unanimous. There is no public comment at this meeting. Okay. All
I
right.
had a question. We had in the last meeting, we talked about inviting the ag teachers from all of the different schools. Were we gonna put that at somewhere on the calendar or hold off?
Actually, yes, that was March. I think that was in the minutes from last time that we discussed, that's what I read, that we discussed doing that in March.
So that's,
So
are we confirming that?
So we need to confirm that that is what we're going to do. Can you help us with that,
Yep.
James, or what do we need to do to make sure? If we need to go to the school board or whatever to make sure that they get that word out, we can. Just let us know what we need to do. Is that good? Okay. And we want, if I'm clear, make sure I'm correct, we want all teachers involved in ag, elementary or K-4, 5 through high school invited to the meeting so we can discuss how to plan to educate in ag. Is that correct? Because there are different programs.
Yeah.
Farm Bureau, correct, Charlie, has ag in the classroom.
Runs in all the schools.
West Oak
Yeah.
Middle School is the only middle school in our county that has FFA, but they just won a national prize, is my understanding, recognition. So I think we need to make sure that we try to promote it throughout the county.
Yeah, any school that has an ag program, right?
Right. Needs to be invited.
Yeah.
And we did want to include Chris, the 4-H. Do y'all have someone yet or working on it?
We're working on it.
Okay, that's fine. I just, as long as we're working on it, we're good.
March will be questionable.
Okay, understand. Just say we're working on it now. Nate, do you have any thoughts on that? I know you're in touch with a lot of the younger
Yeah.
group, but no, does that sound like a plan to you? Okay, all right. So,
Good bunch of people.
can I just have a reconfirm of a motion? We're doing all ag in March with the teachers. I need a motion and a second.
So I'll make a motion.
Second. All in favor?
Okay.
We'll get that sent out. I think that's redundant because we did that, but we'll just make sure we covered our bases. So Dr. Kantrovich is here, and I don't think he needs any introduction to the board, but he is the guy that is the ag business guy for Clemson, the tax guy and part of the extension, and I think he is here to kind of help us look at some ways to get folks educated and how to, estate plan, save the farm, different, all tools that are in the toolbox. So, we can have that discussion with him. And, I'll just welcome Dr. Canterbury.
Thank you.
We are so happy to have you tonight.
I appreciate being here, appreciate the invite, and I didn't really know exactly what y'all wanted or what wanted to hear, so I kind of wrote through a few things on slides. Didn't really want to have a full presentation or anything like that, because I wanted this to be a little bit more of a discussion to figure out what you all wanted and see what we can kind of do from a cooperative extension as well as an ag biz side of things. But figured everybody does PowerPoints, and so this might be just the easiest way to put a bunch of stuff out there. So we're talking about ag, and so a lot of these numbers are coming from a couple of places, so I do want to put a caveat on some of this, and some of you know me already. I can't stand behind a podium, I gotta move around. So, the USDA National Ag Statistics Service does a ag census once every 5 years. Typically, when they have enough employees, when they do the last round was in '22, typically we start seeing that following August, which would have been in '23, reports start to come out from that census. And we started seeing bits and pieces of information coming out. And then usually by the end of the year, we should be seeing a lot more information, like county-wide statistics. Everything seems to be backed up this round. They just don't have enough people doing what they need to. They lost a lot of people during the previous administration, and so they literally stopped doing certain reports because they don't have enough people to do things. So I suspect in the next 6 months we'll have some updates. So in short, what I'm saying is these could be about 3 to 4 years old numbers, and I will give you my opinion on where they're probably going to end up, but that doesn't mean they're going to be right. So South Carolina's ag economy right now contributes about $42 billion, provides about 200,000 jobs to the ag economy, to the state. Top 10 commodities, I'm hoping that you are taking a close look at those top 10 commodities, because a couple of those commodities, the bulk of them are done here in Oconee County. Okay, certain ones. Can you take a guess which ones in particular?
You got 8 out of 10.
Well, we've got one of them in particular, if I'm not mistaken, out of that last ag census, 94%, I believe, came from Oconee, from one of those particular commodities. I don't know if it's gonna be right, yes, are some of our poultry stuff, right? So our broilers, and that's just picking up steam since 2017. And so broilers, turkeys, greenhouse nurseries, the reality is turkeys is pretty small, even though it's a top 10 here. And when we take a look at it for Oconee County, it's actually relatively tiny. Okay, and the same thing with the hog side of things. But cotton, corn, cattle, soybeans, peanuts, eggs, wheat. Yeah, we don't expect a lot of corn, beans, and wheat up here in Oconee County. We're up here in the hills. Okay, is there some? Yeah, I'm pretty close with a couple of producers that are producing some, but they're not the yields that we're going to get out of the PD. It's stuff that's typically going to be immediately utilized locally, right? So, I wanted you all to kind of see that. And then, did I do something wrong? It's not.
This is not perfect.
All right, there we go. So, under 2017 numbers, so when you see those first couple of bullets, when they're down or when it's up, that's in comparison to the previous census, all right? 815 farms, down 8% from 2012. You see it's about 62,000, just over 62,000 acres in farmland, also down about 8% from the 12 census. I'm also going to expect the number of farms is a little bit tricky, because that's going to be dependent. If we ended up with more individuals, especially some of those smaller farms that are just coming into farming, those new beginning farmer folks just coming in that we're seeing a pretty good increase, if they've responded to some of these surveys, we might see those numbers increase potentially. The acreage, I think that's going to be a roll of the dice, because we've got a lot of development that's taken place over the last 5 years. And it's not into smaller farms, it's in the houses, right? It's not, and we've got some commercial stuff. As I come up here from Clemson, and I come from some of these other communities, even 5, 6 years ago, good Lord, I take a look going, what, that was pasture. Now we got a plaza out on it, And so it's going to be interesting to see how those numbers fare, okay? The average farm size was 77 acres. Not surprising. Some of you may remember or may know my history. My two first kids were born in the hills of Kentucky. My last one was born up north, and so I kind of joke, I actually, when they were young, we had the Civil War taken care of in my house and represented on both sides of the Mason-Dixon line. All right, and I sometimes joke amongst, when I'm doing programs, that I've got 2 college funds and a bond fund for my youngest one. And so I kind of joke about the war of northern aggression. That is my youngest one against my first 2. And there is no 2 ways about it. So, but that 77 acres bit, that's kind of normal, all right? And when we start taking a look at some of our bigger ag dollars being raised, and Chris, you can kind of tell me if I'm wrong here, when we start seeing some of the poultry growth that we are seeing in those confinement situations, those are some big numbers for dollar values, but it's happening on some very small acreage, all right? And there's been a positive, and some of y'all may not even realize this, we're seeing it at Oconee and Pickens, but I watched it before it got here happening in Mississippi and Alabama. We're seeing some influence coming from Southeast Asians that are finally getting some money and buying some of those old poultry facilities that went vacant, redoing them and re-bringing them up. They can't afford a lot of the larger land, and good Lord, I'm looking for property in a house up here. I'm having a hard time finding anything I can afford, okay? But we're seeing some of that type of growth taking place within some of those areas. And there's a few lenders, one out of Georgia in particular, that is lending to some of the folks buying some of these smaller and very, what I would consider almost antiquated poultry facilities. The ones that I used to use in Kentucky for hay, because I couldn't use it for anything else. So, or actually for me, we were also putting some tobacco in there too, to store some tobacco before we took it to auction. That also might tell you how long ago that was. But, so nonetheless, our value of farm products, read that number. I went back and I had to double check to make sure I didn't screw that one up. That's sizable. $159 million, if where I got it from was correct. So I was taken back by that, and so I'm going to for some reason my mind's going, that doesn't sound right, and so I'm trying to hunt that number down to see, is that really correct, or was there a typo somewhere? Okay. So that being said, now increase of 31% since 2012. The value of farm products sold. I throw that out there just so that for a wow factor on those type of numbers, but those are not numbers that I typically will rely on, simply because those are volatile. You end up with a black swan event. One weird little thing can throw your values through the roof for a very short period of time. And if it happens during the census time, when you go back to normal, that it's a wild card. Okay, I like to look at typically quantities and what's quantifiable, because that's a better indicator of, do we really have some of that growth taking place? And we know that, and we are seeing some growth in some of the quantities of some products, predominantly in the poultry side of things. And the beef is up and down, okay? That being said, I personally believe there's some opportunities in beef right now, but it's expensive. So we keep going. As of the 2017 census, we've got over 7.2 million broilers. We got over 14.5 for cattle and calves, and about 50,000 layers that are out there. And so I kind of obviously picked some of our top things that we have in Oconee County. Why am I showing you this, and why am I showing you those numbers that I saw in that last slide? To indicate the value and importance of why we're here, ag. Okay? And ag can be dramatically affected if things are done incorrectly within a county. When I lived up north, up in Michigan, I lived in a county that was a pretty heavy populace. I don't like being around people. Chris is going to kind of laugh at this. I typically just don't like people all that much, especially if they're not part of the ag community. They just frustrate me. And so I like to be away from people, but when I took over an administrative role for Michigan State University in the west side of the state, it was a beautiful area. If you like outdoor activities, once you figure out you gotta spend a lot of money on warm clothes, then it's an outdoorsman's world, okay? But we had 600,000 people in that county, all right? That county size is the size of, I could take Pickens, Oconee, and probably Anderson, and maybe part of another county, and get into that county, okay? It could take me, if I was going on an angle, to get from one corner to the other almost an hour, all right? It was about 45, 50 miles, all right? So it was a large county. It was also bordering Grand Rapids. Grand Rapids was in the next county over to the east. The other problem was, to the west, we had Lake Michigan, so it stopped. So that part was kind of nice, but if you got a large lake with beachfront, what do you think happens? A lot of tourists, a lot of tourism. And what do you think happens when people come and visit you and go, that's a nice place? They come back in October to see if they can buy a house, all right? So we had a lot of issues with regards to land loss, going to housing development, commercialization, and we had a lot of similar issues. We're seeing that here in Oconee. We're seeing that across South Carolina, across the entire state, but predominantly upstate, just south of Charlotte, Charleston area, and in parts of the low country along the coast. So, typical, this should not come to any surprise to y'all. What are some of our present challenges to the ag industry in the state? And this is happening in other states as well. Development. According to the Global Ag Productivity, 175 acres of farmland is lost every single hour here in the U.S. That took me back a little bit when I saw that, and those numbers are 2 to 3 years old. So it may have picked up. DTN says we lost about 1.9 million acres in 2022 alone, all right, of farmland across the country. How do we maintain our land values? All right, this is kind of a facetious question, I guess. How do we maintain our land values? There's a reason why, some of us have been here because we were born, raised here, this is where we are, and we want to stay here. We have other individuals that have kind of moved here because of the rural characteristics, and you can still get the small community feel. We don't want housing developments. We don't want plazas. We don't want widening highways. We don't want to have to attach ourselves to sewer and city water. We want our wells and our septic systems, and we want to be able to maintain the rural characteristics of our community, while also understanding, in many cases, especially coming from a farming family. Yes, ma'am?
Sorry, the statistic about 175 acres lost every hour, is that
Nationwide.
nationwide?
Nationwide.
Okay,
Yep,
thank you.
nationwide. If that was here in South Carolina alone, that'd be really
gone.
frightening. Really, really frightening. Sorry, I didn't
Sorry
make that
I
clear.
interrupted you.
No, that's all right. I'm glad you did. So I want to make that clear. So, and so anyhow, so we have a tendency to want the next generation to take over and kind of do what we want, do what we have been doing. It's kind of the family tradition, right? And so, and when I talk ag, that's ag and timber as well, okay? So I want everybody to understand that. It's not just farming activities, but that is ag and timber. We may have to expand if I want to bring the next generation on, right? Because I've only got one pot of gold. My farm can only sustain and provide X amount of dollars. So then if I want to bring the next generation in, and we usually want to start them in their 20s, and I might be in my 40s, 50s, 60s, depending on, when I had kids, what have you. I have to give up some of my money to be able to pay to the next generation for them to come back to the farm, or what do I have to do? I have to expand. And if I'm having to expand and buy land, and I am competing with housing development, plazas, Am I paying farm rate for that land, or am I paying development rate? I'm paying development rate. And it may push us out of being able to expand to even allow the next generation to come back. Unless I have a very high dollar value product. And I'm not sure I know of a dollar value product that is high enough to be paying $15,000 to $25,000 an acre. Marijuana won't even pay for it. And I'm dead serious. I am dead serious. I do, you know, I work with some folks over on the West Coast, and some attorneys and a few others over there, and so since they don't charge me when they call with questions or their clients, I'll talk to them. And I know a lot of people that have gotten into the marijuana industry in Oregon and in California, and they've left. They went into hemp, and they left, because they can't make any money at it. All right? So, all that being said, we need to figure out other things. And we talk about all sorts of stuff. We talk about the conservation easements, and I've got that in there. That's a pretty big thing, Upstate Forever, right? I'm working with 2 or 3 farms up here right now that are looking at selling land for conservation easements. Okay? I shouldn't say selling land, they're selling their rights, they're selling their development rights for those conservation easements, and they're trying to figure out which route to go, which one's gonna give me a better deal, because now we got the Farm Bureau Land Bank one, and we got the Upstate Forever, which is running typically through NRCS, and they were doubling up for a while. Now they're kind of backing off from some of that and making some changes, and there's a few other groups that you can always go to. But those are some options, but that also ties our hands a little bit, right? So, because what are we doing? We're selling those development rights. And so if I sell those development rights, you would think, in theory, I should be able to purchase that land for less expensive. Sometimes that works in certain areas, sometimes it doesn't. Okay, what you've done is just essentially guaranteed that, you know, somebody's gonna have to spend a lot of money to get it out and buy back those development rights, all right? And some people are willing to do that. But what are some other issues? Ag risks, market risk. So typically, if you take a look, you look up agricultural risks, there's 5 or 6 different risks associated with ag, typically that a farmer is gonna have to deal with. And it'll vary depending on whose website you go to and how it's described or how they title it. But in general, we have market risk, right? And typically when we're talking about that, that's thinking about, I just planted X, or I just bought a whole bunch of 4-weight steers and I'm gonna feed them out, or whatever I'm gonna do, and you're expecting prices to be of X when it's time for me to sell them, but does it always happen that way? Rarely, right? Right. Now, if you're big enough, there's things that we can do. There's options markets, there's future markets, right? We can hedge, there's some other things that we can do. And I know there used to be where essentially group marketing for livestock, right? Where we get a whole bunch of guys together at once. We say, here's what we're gonna do. We're starting on this day with the hopes of being finished so that we can load a trailer with 3, 4, 5 guys' cattle and send them down the road, right? So we have those types of things. We also have legal and regulatory. And that legal risk is more than just the actual regulatory. But those are the issues that we normally see. What are some examples of that?
DHEC.
DHEC rules when it comes to dealing with comprehensive nutrient management planning, right? It could also be with access to water. That could be another one, right? But it's more than that. It's also, when I was here last time, I think it was succession planning I think I talked about, right? It could also be about that estate planning side of stuff. Now, that being said, some of the very large farms that I work with, still work with and have worked with in the past, they had debt. The banks requested to have a copy of their estate plan and succession plan before they would continue to give them even operating loans. Why?
They want to make sure that they're solid.
They want to make sure that they're solid and there's a plan. If God forbid mom and dad go out on date night and get slammed by a semi-truck that runs a stop sign, there is a plan in order and enacted so that essentially things just don't fall apart at the farm. All right, it's a risk protection. Those are legal documents. What else? Anybody rent land from somebody or rent to somebody? I saw a couple. Raise your hands nice and high. I might pick on you. Okay. How many are handshake? Do we have physical contracts? You're saying yes, you're saying yes. Has it always been that way? I'm going to say thank you for that. All right, because I even used to do by the handshake, but the reality is that's part of that legal risk. Okay? And is the contract done right? Or did I go to LegalZoom and just spend my $25 and pull it off the internet, which may not hold water if they have some wrong information in there that doesn't fit with state regulation and law. Okay? So that's some of that legal. There's also human risk. What does that mean? We don't think about this. There's some that are, I'm gonna guess what the first thing would be if I push you all to tell me.
Somebody getting hurt on your land.
Somebody getting hurt on my land, that's one, right? Somebody shows up, either invited or uninvited, right? How many of y'all have a pond? What happens if somebody gets on and drowns? Do you have enough trespassing signs up and around? Do you have fence lines up there? Have you called the police every time you've caught somebody on there so that there is a formal record that you are doing your due diligence to make sure that people are kicked off and notification so that a family can't come back and sue you for not having a fence, not having a no trespassing, right? So that's one. What else? How about if you have a specialty crop and I can't find labor? It's human risk. How about if the main caretaker, manager, operator of the farm gets sick and can't do the work? That's also human risk. Okay? And what happens if the operator dies? So now we're going to combine human risk along with that legal risk. What's going to take place? All right? So that's human risk. We also have production risk, right? I plant something in April, May, and I get no rain, right? Or aphid infestation in my soybeans early on, or you pick it, right? And so those are the big ones. And so how do we deal with that? Are there ways to handle it? Are we ever going to take care of 100% of the risks? No, but what can we do to promote certain aspects to change behaviors and habits? There is not a single silver bullet out there. I know that's what everybody wants, just give me a template. No, it doesn't work. Okay? We have to utilize all the tools in our toolbox. I know a lot of times we've got to work on a piece of equipment and we're using the back end of a screwdriver or crowbar as a hammer because the hammer fell off the tailgate of the truck running through the field, and I don't know where it's at. But we got to figure out what all the tools in the toolbox are. What can we do to help limit any of this liability? And some of it you can deal with. Others has to be done at the county level. And that's going to include things such as planning commission. You know, do we need to relook at the master plan at the county level? Work with local municipalities within the county that have their own jurisdiction for zoning and ordinances so that they match up with the county's plan long-term and be able to maintain our rural characteristics, but also allow, it's not going to be a handout. And it, you know, some people may say it doesn't go far enough. There are some limitations that we have to accept. We are in a very difficult and very volatile business. It is what it is. But with their help, we might be able to do certain things from zoning perspectives and ordinance perspectives that will help limit even some of that growth to hopefully allow our farms to flourish and maybe even grow and get some more people in to buy some land specifically for the purposes of farming.
I think in Oconee County, we basically, for the most part, correct me, James, if I'm wrong, but we are control free. Like, we don't really have we have zoning, but it's all voluntary.
Yep.
If you want to zone agriculture or not. And one of the issues is, of course, if it's control-free, it's just like with the conservation easement, that property, at the end of the day, is worth more than the one that has got a zoning designation on it, even though it can be changed.
Yep.
And I think one of the things that a lot of the farmers want to know is, so you mentioned Pickens County. Pickens County does not have zoning.
Yep.
But Pickens County has development standards, which means that, which, you know what it means. But, so what I'm saying is, with our planning commission, and I guess the question is now, I know that for a long time, well, y'all can help me with anything. When we had, Mr. Williams on the planning commission, I know he hasn't been there over a year, but he kind of represented the cattle industry. He was kind of there as a farmer to represent. Do we have that now on planning? Do we have someone that kind of represents ag? Is there, I've been thinking about the makeup when Josh and I went, and I don't know that I really saw that we had that representation anymore.
There is not a professional agricultural industry person on the planning commission.
Would that be one of your suggestions to try to find out what we need to do? To
That is one of, yes, that is just one of many from that standpoint. And I'm not gonna, I am not a city planner, I am not a county planner, I am none of those. Now, I will say, when I was up north, so y'all know, Ms. Kim knows, because I told her, but I was the chair of a local township planning commission, and I was also the vice chair for our county as well. And the county I lived in, just to give you an idea, back in '02 and '05, back then, we had about $350 million of cash receipts off our farms in our county. So it was a very large agricultural county. We were number one in the state at that time for cash receipts off of farms. We made sure that at county level as well as at, in that case, at our township, the local level, there were 2 or 3 of us that actually represented ag. But to give you an idea, in my township, we had one farm by itself that raised 1,000 acres of blueberries. And so we had a lot of large farms like that. And that one farm had by themselves 800 harvesters they would hire just for that one farm. All right, that's pretty good size, okay? And so that's just one farm. So we actually had two blueberry farms that were 1,000 acres each. But so that gives you kind of an idea. So we had that, and at the county level, we also had, it was the membership makeup was, especially at the county level, had to have somebody that represented actually another planner that was on there, an environmental type person and consultant, agriculture. I think we had 1 or 2 slots for the ag, developer, general community citizen type thing. So we kind of had, that's how it was developed, so that when somebody was appointed or applied for, they had to fill one of those particular slots. I would strongly encourage that. I would also encourage kind of beginning to look at something. When I lived in Nebraska, I lived in a rural county. The entire county only had 7,500 people in it, and it was about 60 miles north to south, 45 miles east to west. There was, at the county level, there was a minimum requirement if you were going to buy some land to build a home for you to live on. For most of the county, that required you to buy and purchase a minimum, I think it was 40 acres. That's not gonna happen here, okay? But out in northeast Nebraska, it's wide open. And so that was not, and back then at that time, that was not an issue. So there are a lot of things that can be done. There are things that ought to be done. Where I lived, it was quasi-voluntary as well, up to a point. They had sectors. This was, rural residential, this was ag. Here's what you're allowed to do in each one of these different sectors. If you're there were minimum requirements for lot sizes, et cetera. And then at all levels, there were minimum building requirements, setbacks, what had to be met, your normal inspections. If it was part of ag, it automatically fell under certain right to farm certain things. And so you still had to meet certain setbacks, but you didn't have to go through the same type of inspections if it was gonna be, versus if it was gonna be a building for commercial use or residential use, if that makes sense. And so there's lots of things that can be done to start that process. But if it's essentially do what you want, here's what we're recommending, you're not gonna be able to stop development that way. And then you're in essence, and you can see it now, you're almost fighting a losing battle. You can see it driving up any of the major highways. So,
One thing that James was really good about sending us was, we have the situation in our county to where there's a lot of, and people get it confused. Ag exemption, they think if they have ag exemption, then they're zoned ag, and they're.
That's not.
They are, they're just control freak.
Yep.
For the most part. But a lot of those really don't qualify for an ag exemption, is that correct? And when we're looking at those?
are we talking about the ag exemption as it relates, and there's 3 or 4 different things. So we've got that, sometimes that term that may be used from a planning zoning standpoint. We've got the sales tax, and then we have the property tax valuation.
Property tax valuation
Yep.
is what we're talking about. And I guess I don't wanna misspeak. I guess they've had that exemption, but it doesn't revert back once it's sold, correct?
It is supposed to revert back.
Yeah.
Well, it depends on how it's sold. So if it's sold and it's still in holding and there's still timber on it, it could still be.
And they're gonna continue to manage it for that same purpose, it
It
rolls.
will stay.
But if not, technically, the seller now has to pay rollback taxes too.
Or part of the contract on who pays the taxes.
Yep, and that can be decided based on the selling agreement, the sales agreement. But if I go ahead and I take all that timber down and now I'm gonna put another house up for one of my kids, and I'm no longer using it for those same purposes, I gotta pay rollback taxes on it.
Supposed to.
Is that something that planning is going to look at, or?
So that is in the assessor's office. That is a tax issue. I don't know about taxes and I don't really like money.
And that's state, there's also state rules with regards to how that's supposed to work.
Yeah.
So that will overrule certain things that take place at the local level on that.
Okay.
So, and there have been some issues when counties were not doing things as expected. Others have gotten involved and then it's come down and the state may have had to help. May have had to get involved or other issues, including attorneys, to make it right. And that's happened in Aiken County, I know specifically. It's also happened in, I can't remember if it was York or one of the other ones up in that general area. Within the last 3 years, I remember at least 3 legal disputes coming in from a couple of those counties.
Because if you look at what is the maps that show what is ag in the county, basically we are ag everywhere, if you look at that part of it.
Yep.
So I guess that's, and I know a lot of that has been sold and it's no longer ag, but there's still.
So there's a lot of issues going on, and like I said, really, there's no silver bullet. It takes having to do a whole bunch of things, including education and trying to work with the farms. The farmers have to be willing to accept certain things and actually coming to, if Chris does an extension program or if I do one, and then you have to do more than just sit there, listen, shake your head like the little dog in the back of the window. You actually have to hopefully gain something and then enact and implement. And that may look different from individual to individual, but we need to make some changes at the county level as well, because I can do what I need to take a look at my numbers better, make better management decisions, go to a program that Chris has done or somebody else has done on becoming a better manager and producer to increase my yields. But if I'm getting squeezed out because of development around me, it doesn't matter what I do, it's gonna be a lost cause, right? And so there needs to be those other changes, and nobody wants any more regulation, nobody wants this or that, but the reality is, to be able to maintain that rural character, and I wanna continue farming, and I don't wanna lose my agricultural infrastructure, You may end up being the last farmer there, and if I have to go 150 miles to get what I need, you might as well pack up now. And we've seen that happen with our dairy industry. And I know the newest numbers that are just coming out are gonna show 9,000 cows in the state from commercial herds. We're nowhere close to that, because those numbers are 3 years old. That's one of those things that I track. We're closer to 6,500 or 7,000. That's what remains of our entire dairy industry, okay? And even if somebody wanted to come in and deal with a commercial dairy herd, it's gonna be tough, because our infrastructure for dairy industry from a commercial standpoint is pretty much falling apart. You are gonna have to do value added to really make a go of it within the dairy industry, whether that's a creamery. We've got one in southern Anderson County that's bottling. That is what you're gonna have to do, and it's not easy. You just don't pick that up. It's gonna be 10, 15 years of heartache to be able to get your brand out there and be able to survive.
There you go, I'm calling them more.
No. No, a few years ago, there was somebody that was milking a few cows, but I mean, it wasn't what I would, it was going to neighbors it was raw milk going to neighbors. And I don't think they're doing it anymore. And I might be, and maybe they're on the board, I can't remember, but I
There
thought.
may be a few small.
And I'm not counting those 2 or 3 cow guys, I'm not, and females. You know, there's a couple that have started up with some goats too. And one dealing with sheep, that one was, I think I put a kibosh on that one before they got started.
No,
But-
we have sheep dairy in the county.
Do we? So, I know I talked to somebody, not in this county, but somewhere else, they wanted to get into sheep, which was fine, but the purpose and what they wanted, they did not have an understanding of the physiology of sheep and how milking occurs. And when they quickly realized what they were hoping to do, they were gonna have to quadruple their herd size, and they just didn't have the space for it. But anyhow, those are some of those things that can be done. And then we have the chicken or egg. Can we get some ag-based businesses to come in to spur other agricultural and farming activities? Most businesses and industries are not gonna come unless they know they've got a guaranteed volume that they can run through there, otherwise they're not gonna be able to pay for the investment. And so those are some other issues that's more long-term. But to me, if it was me, my recommendation would be start having to look really hard, ramping up everybody that are farmers having to become more vocal at the county level from a political standpoint, working with the planning commission. Usually our farmers are the ones that we don't want any more regulation. We're over-regulated, we feel like, already, right? But this might be the only way to be able to save what we're doing and the rural character of Oconee County. It's more than Oconee. Pickens is going through the same thing, right? So, and Anderson is too, up to a degree. And I'm not saying development is bad, okay? But there are negative consequences. It's like the physics principle. For every action, there's an equal and or greater reaction. Sometimes there's a positive reaction, sometimes it's negative. And so, but what's important is you can't just let growth happen. It needs to be controlled, right? Because infrastructure even becomes an issue. And legally, even at the federal level, you have to allow everything, you have to zone to allow everything, even if we don't like it, whether it's religiously, philosophically, or what have you. Once it's built out, you can say it was allowed, but now we are built out in that sector, so it's done. Does that kind of make sense? You're kind of looking at me funny.
No, just, there's state and federal laws that go into some of those things.
Exactly, yeah.
Constitutional protections and.
Exactly.
Get into it.
And we have other issues too that begin to come up that works in reverse. Somebody all of a sudden goes ahead and they're living in a residential area and all of a sudden they got 3 hogs in the backyard because there's no zoning or rules with regards to that. Or there is zoning rules and they're not supposed to have it, but they start throwing some hogs back there and a couple of roosters with some hens, and they say, I'm protected under right to farm. Well, that's not necessarily true. And so a lot of people start grieving, and I had this within an urban area that does have zoning, and he came to me and said, he just bought back, essentially it was great-grandpa's facility, it hadn't been farmed down for a long time. They lost the grandfathering clause from the zoning because guess what? nobody even farming the property, residential kind of grew up around it. And so they lost their grandfathering clause of being able to use that for agricultural purposes because nobody did it. It was just vacant ground now. And so he wanted to start farming it, and I said, well, you need to better go check. You should have gone and worked with the local folks before you put the money into it that you wanted to put into it. And he quickly found out he was not gonna be able to do what he planned on. And he was claiming, well, you know, what about right to farm? I'm going, that was 2 generations ago that you may have been able to claim it if they were there before the residential aspect was. If you think about right to farm, that protection is to protect the farmer when people move to the nuisance. All right? You can't move somewhere and then create the nuisance and say I'm protected. Does that make sense? And so those are some of those little issues that we always, you know, these are all those things that we kind of hear of. And I've had to deal with this as a planning commission going, you're in rural residential, we can't allow certain things in rural residential because that's that buffer between that subdivision that just went in that are living on postage stamps and the farms over there that are, you know, I got 100,000 birds, all right? And I need to spread my litter, okay? And so that rural residential is kind of like that buffer. So how far do you go? Do we allow 2 horses on X number of acres and some birds? Do we allow a few head of cattle? Do we allow hogs, or do we limit it in some way? And that can run you into some legal issues and aspects. And so there's some very specific things that need to be done and developed, and it's not easy. It's not an easy task.
So, first of all, thank you for coming.
Mhm.
Thank you for all the wonderful information. And I know from the last time you were here, which was about 1.5 years ago, maybe a little over, when you talked about succession planning and all of that with estate planning, there were quite a few folks that did show up and wanted to know more
Yep.
about that.
And a couple of them I have worked with extensively, so, yeah.
So,
So, yep.
I guess my question back to the team is, this is all great to the board, it's all great information, but with the open dates that we have, and hearing what Dr. Kanovich brought to us about the loss of the acreage in the farms, and there not necessarily being a plan, some folks having a plan, is this one of those educational pieces that we want to try to bring to the public in, say, we have May that's open, we have July that's open, we can switch some things around if y'all would prefer, but is that something we want to try to plan for and try to do whenever we have time to? We'll be going to a few of the districts between now and then and letting folks know that, hey, this is something that you may want to come here. This is a tool, this is someone that can work with you guys. Is that something that?
idea.
And there are, I'll throw out one more option too. If you want, and there's a series of some of these things that you want, we can take a longer period of time and actually have a 3-hour program that I can work with Chris and some of our other extension folks up here to get set up, and y'all can kind of help market and kind of be the drivers for some of that, kind of help pound the pavement, as it were. And, you know, so we can do that from a succession standpoint, but some of those other things that I talked about with that risk, my team, I've got individuals that specialize in different areas of ag biz.
Right.
And so I can bring somebody up and do 90 minutes, 2 hours on different types of insurances for ag as it relates to crop insurance, whole farm revenue insurance, NAP, what does that mean? If there's not a policy here, what's NAP and what, you know, why is that important? And kind of explain how does it work? How can I make that work as part of my marketing plan? I can have somebody come up here and even talk about, you know, we may not be big enough for full commodity market futures contracts, but maybe the options can work as almost like a backstop insurance, depending on who you are. Okay? And so we can have somebody that specializes in that come here and talk to y'all about that. Myself and a few others can be here talking about the succession planning. We can talk about contracts, we can talk about business structures, we can talk about accounting, record keeping, how to develop what we need to get the most information out so we can make better management decisions. I always say, listen, I want y'all to become not just a farmer, because sometimes, I mean, farmers are already veterinarians, meteorologists, I can go down, agronomists, I can go down the list, but I want everybody to actually become a farm manager. And if you kind of think about it in that fashion, and if you're like me, I just want to get on a tractor and make hay with a 30-30 by my side so I can take pot shots at the rattlesnakes and the coyotes. But the reality is, if I need to really make decisions about what I'm doing, I need to know what type of information I need to collect, and I need to spend a certain amount of time in the office figuring out that data. How can I put that data together, pull it out so I can make better management decisions based off that information? That's something we all do really poorly on, typically. And so we can do a whole series if you want.
Why don't we advertise a roundtable with all the clubs? The Cattlemen's Association, beekeepers, apple growers, and just hear them out and see what their concerns and needs are, Chris.
I mean, no, that'd be great. I mean, we could do that. It's just a matter of, getting them to come out and do it. But I mean, yeah, like a little round table, just kind of an advisory group to the advisory group.
And then figure out what you want, and then
Yeah,
you want to be the one to get with Dr. Pandrovich,
Yeah, we
and then
can.
we'll try to plan
we
some
can. I
of
know
those.
down in, he mentioned it down in Anderson a few years ago now. We did, I think it's a half a day and then a 2 day.
That's right, we did, yeah, we did. We did that too there about 6 weeks apart.
Yeah.
I forgot about
It's like
that.
one of them was a half a day, kind of giving you the gist of all this stuff and just a little bit of stuff to be dangerous. And then 6 to 8 weeks later, we did a 2-day training that really delved into all of it. And, in my opinion, there was a lot of people there that needed it, but there was a whole lot more people there that needed it that were not there.
I understand.
And it's, the whole deal on the succession planning, it's easy for us, or for younger people to sit there and say, this is what needs to be done, but how do you go back to grandpa and tell him? "You
That's
need
the
to
hardest
change
part.
this.
Right.
You need to rewrite your will, we need to reset the farm, incorporated LLC, whatever else, taxes. This is what we need to do."
Living trust.
Grandpa says, "No, I know what we're gonna do, it's right here." And then grandpa
They'll
dies.
find out when I die.
Grandpa dies, and we all know a farm that's been that way, at least one, if not multiple.
And I've got stories that'll,
Every county,
Rural your
every
tail.
county community I've worked in over the last 23 years,
It's had that.
they've been brothers and sisters don't talk to each other.
I got done with working with one farm. It was 4 years in the making here, and I know at least one side, it was probably $350,000 in legal bills. I had one dad, almost similar to what you did. Dad set up a C corp, and 2 boys, and they were opposites, should have never happened. And I got pulled in on that one, and I had to travel a long ways twice to go to court. That got, all of a sudden, after I traveled all those ways to get there and they kept extending it. But that one lasted, I got a call a year and a half ago from one side saying we're finally done. It was 8 years, and I know the one side by that time, because I know the attorneys. It was like an $800,000 bill by that time, just from that one side. Okay? When things aren't done correctly, and everybody says, my kids will be fine, they're not gonna fight, you're dreaming. You are dreaming. Stop and think, it doesn't take too much land. Piece of ground, about 25 grand an acre down the road from here. All right? It doesn't take too many acres to start getting into some real money. And if you don't think kids are gonna fight over that, and you gotta remember, by that time, you're probably gonna have kids that are married. And you gotta deal with their spouses and what's being whispered into their ears as well because of their thoughts. Right? And then grandkids on top of it. And so it's it can get really ugly really fast.
But to your point, Josh, I think it would be a good idea to get some of the different cattlemen, beekeepers, apple growers, somebody from Timber End or whatever else in, and kind of see what they think we really need to focus on.
We could get him at our crop production. Be good, it'd be great.
Well, we've only got so much time at those meetings, Charlie.
8 times, that's a serious
I'm
business.
just poking at Adam.
And
Jay
like I
Graham
said,
should be all right.
I mean, these are the things that I enjoy teaching. So I don't mind, and you can get me up, and if you guys wanna have something separate and an idea, you know, I'll put something together, and if I'm not the right person, I'll find the right person. Yeah, I mean, it is, you want, I've done all sorts of talks within my little realm of what my little brain has in it. And I don't mind coming up here, and anybody calls me, I'll call back. The only thing I ask is, if I don't have you plugged into my phone, I'm not gonna answer it, because I just assume you're gonna try to sell me a warranty for my car. And so leave a voicemail, and let me know who you are, where you're from, and what you want. And you need to leave how late I can call you. Because I'm gonna get on the road, I'm gonna take my daughter out for supper, and I'm gonna go head back for 2 hours and drive on the road. I'm gonna call a whole bunch of people that I need to call back sometime between the hours of 9 o'clock and 11 o'clock tonight. And if you go to bed like I normally go to bed, because when I wake up in the morning, some of y'all might be sleeping if I call you, because you didn't tell me what time I couldn't call you at.
Well, I know that I travel the state too, like you do. And the lower part of the state is solar panels, you know, putting 700-800 acres of farmland in solar panels. People's really concerned about that. But up here, it's mainly housing developments. I call it pad houses, whatever.
Yeah,
And
the old spec houses, I mean, that's what's going up.
And we've been coming up here now for a good many years, pleading our case, doing the economic impact. Broiler houses, I've got them, I grow crops, I grow soybeans, wheat, whatever.
And just to give you an idea.
And we're pleading our case.
Yeah.
But I feel like we're going backwards.
And
we need to know what to do, how to get a leg in where they will be on our side, I guess. What can make agriculture great again in Oconee County, I guess is what I'm trying to say. I'm at the point, I got 2 sons and a daughter, and they farm with me. And I'm already stretching in another county farming. And I'm looking at even going to another state. But, I mean, what do you?
I have made that recommendation to a few people, going, listen, you can sell your land here, and you can move further out into a rural area, and you can buy 5 or 6 times or 10 times, in some cases 10 times, the land to be able to do what you need to do. And I had a discussion with one farmer not too long ago going, why are you not selling? Because it's, right now, your net worth is literally going backwards because of where they are located and what they are doing. But if they were to sell, they could buy an island off of Bahama and retire and not have any of that stress. Or just, heck, go to South Georgia where nobody else is and buy $3,500 an acre land.
But
And you just sold $25,000 an acre land right off the interstate.
But if you really look at it, like I mentioned broiler houses, we're number 1
Yep.
in the state. They've been here for so many years. And the economic impact's big. The only thing that it costs us, the county and the state, maybe it's a little road work from the tractor trailers hauling feed and hauling
Yep.
chicken. But if you look at these housing developments, I've kind of done some research on them myself. Bigger roads, more power, sewer, more water.
It is a misnomer that we allow developments that's gonna help our tax law. Actually, it's the exact opposite. From taxes coming in, typically, you need to draw in commercial and industrial individuals to come in, set up those businesses, that is what subsidizes the infrastructure needed for the residents that are living there, okay? Unfortunately, over the last 7, 8 years, you never hear that being discussed or talked about. It is, how can we cut all the red tape and all the taxation and all this for those businesses, because we want to utilize trickle economics, okay, right? We've all heard that trickle down. It has never once worked, and has been tried multiple times under multiple, and I'm not picking a side, I'm not hitting on one party or another, okay? That's just the realities. It has never, ever worked. And I can go back 50, 60 years. It has never worked. Before that, it has never worked. All right? And this is one of those problems. When I start with the development and we look at a lot of the folks who are coming, where are they coming from? They're coming from urban areas. So they have certain expectations. I want parks, I want tennis courts, I want swimming pools, I want bike trails, and that's fine. To draw business and industry, we need a certain amount of that, especially if it's a business that's not already here. Bike trails are a huge draw for businesses, all right? Especially if they know they have to hire certain individuals that are educated and they want people to stay. They are looking for a certain amount of recreation, so a certain amount of parks and things like that. But parks maintain that rural character. That's okay. What I don't want is, where I live now, we bought because there were a lot of trees around us. It was kind of rural. In the last 6 years, there have been over 2,000 houses going up in a 3-mile radius of my house. What do you think that's done? Now, 7 miles down the road, Volkswagen, which now owns, y'all remember International Vehicles? The old International Scouts?
Got one.
My uncle, that's all he drove. He always had 2 or 3 hanging out. One of them was always a parts car, but I mean, that's what I grew up with. But that being said, Volkswagen bought International Scout, and they are building a plant to revive International Scout. Have you all heard that? In Blythewood, all right, 7 miles from where I'm at. Okay? It's going to be an EV, battery-operated car. When it's built and done in a couple of years, 4,000 new employees. I have no idea where they're going to get them and where the heck they're going to live. We've got land around us now in rural areas, in farm country, $50,000 an acre. And now it's not selling, but I guarantee you it will very shortly.
Where did you say that was located at?
Blythewood,
Blythewood, okay, around Columbia, okay.
yep, northeast side.
I'm with you.
All right, Blythewood, right off the I-77, right off I-77.
We went over the calendar and proved that earlier. We've got the district meetings. What if we ask some of his folks to present succession planning at some of these district meetings?
We can. The one thing that Josh put on the table as, I guess, in a form of a motion to Chris, and that's what they were discussing, was to have like a round table with all of the beekeepers, somebody to represent.
At these meetings?
And I was gonna say, we could ask if they would mind coming to whichever one y'all want, and I think that would be a Chris question, with that. Do you think they would come to this February meeting? Or it's an open discussion, but we could certainly ask them to give us the feedback so we could plan the rest of the year, Rex.
And some of it may not be business oriented. Some of it we may need to bring in, a tree fruit specialist to help with regards to production, especially not apples, but soft fruit. How do I deal with, because I've been having spider wing Drosophila problems.
I know, I'm sorry, Josh. go
At least
ahead.
that way we can get a list of needs and we ain't standing in the
Right.
dark.
Well, and I was sitting here thinking, it says Director of Income Tax Goal. I'm thinking to myself, there's gonna be every one of them wanting something on that, probably, if they.
And that's the thing about it, I think it's, as far as, to go back to Rex's point here, is the succession planning in one of these, there's just not enough time to really get into it.
All I can really do at one of these meetings, because it's late, nobody wants to stick around for too long, is really say, all right, here are some resources, here are some of the things you need to begin thinking about when moving forward, and that's really about it. And we can talk about the different pieces that would make up a good succession transition in the estate plan. And those things, here are the type of document. That's all that could really be covered in really about an hour to 90 minutes.
But The February would be good. I mean, that time of year is kind of still a dead time somewhat, and,
Well, Charlie just asked a question, and so I'm gonna put it out there. He would like for us to switch February and March and go, it would mean we would be going out in March and April, but could we flip February and March, his meeting, have District 5 in March and District 3 in April? At the same time, that would give him a little more time to secure a spot, but then we could invite our ag teachers in February, which could help us plan what we need to do for ag education, and Chris, your roundtable folks, so that they could kind of tell us what we're looking for, and it would be here. Would that be acceptable?
yeah.
And then, with that said, I know Tessa is chairing, and I need to give her 5 minutes, and it's 7:15, on the Food Council and their farmers' breakfast. But it may be, once we get those two feedbacks from January 17th breakfast, you'll have your feedback, and we will have the February meeting here. It's possible then we could plan for some type of longer meeting, because from what I'm hearing and understanding, education, we need a longer time frame. So therefore, then, James, would it be possible to either use council chambers or use something for some of these meetings and pick a May or July meeting for a longer time? Would that work with you, Chris, or
Should.
what is?
No, it should. I mean, I was just gonna say, we could always just create them as extension meetings outside of this as
this?
well.
Okay, and that's fine with us,
Either way,
with me,
you know,
that's up to
so we could
everybody
always
else.
do
And once you get all that feedback,
Yeah,
and Chris and I can talk and kind of work through a few things, and essentially even potentially create a series. It could be something that's done maybe once every 2
Yeah.
weeks, and have a different speaker come in with a different topic or something like that. And if you all are willing to provide some of the assistance with, and help, Chris will send stuff out. But if y'all are kind of willing to help garner that support and bring folks in, and you can kind of say, this is help being sponsored by, Clemson and the Oconee County Council on,
Yeah.
and all that good stuff.
do that.
Would that work? Would that work for
Absolutely.
you, Al?
Absolutely. And like Adam said, a lot of times these type things are more of a series type meetings.
And also, I mean, we gotta remember too, we start getting into May, April, May, we're planting and we're out in the, so if it ain't raining, we're out. And so we may have to kind of look at something, maybe give us a little bit more time edge to really get something going and built up, so that maybe it's a fall, October, November, December, take Christmas break, and then finish it off this time next year.
And I'm good with that. I just think that if we're going to continue doing what the farmers want, we need to know exactly what they're looking for from us.
Absolutely.
And I think it would be a good thing to maybe start having a conversation with the planning commission and the actual board on, do we need to do something to help rein in and control, not say we're not gonna do development, but begin to make sure that it is controlled in a manner so that it can be expanded later. We have easier times, that people aren't right up on top of a road when all of a sudden, 10 years down the road, if we keep building the population we do, you gotta buy a house to be able to widen the road. I mean, it's just little things like that that we don't typically think about. Maybe it's time we need to start looking at putting power lines underground, and it's an upfront investment that will save money later on. And I don't know what that cost is now, but the last time I had to deal with that, it was about $1 million a mile. And that was in some flat territory. So I don't know what it is now. But
You've heard of Sewer South and what's going on with that? Can you give us your thoughts on that? I'm not trying to, it's not a trick question, we just,
it's something that needs to be
Trying to
worked
deal
out
with it.
with the landowners and the need, I mean, why are they pushing what they're pushing? I think that needs to be the question versus what routes. Is it a money issue?
The ones that have called me and confronted me to buy my land, they want level property where they don't have to do a lot of grading.
Because it increases the cost. And sometimes it's cheaper to buy land than it is It's like the idea of looking at a piece of property. Should I go in and renovate a barn or a building? Or is it just cheaper sometimes to put a brand spanking new one up? And that's kind of what they're doing, and they don't want to run. It is a lot longer if I got to go up to that road and turn left, right? Versus just cut on an angle through a piece of property and then have a pump station, right, on a corner somewhere to now bring it up and get up to the higher elevation, right? And so they're essentially trying to save money and do something within certain confines. That would be my guess. I'm not saying it's right or it's wrong, but it needs to be a wider conversation with the community and the landowners that it's going to affect. They should not be attempting to hide that process. And when they built the plan up, they should have notified all of the landowners that they would like to potentially utilize or get easements or purchase properties of to start that conversation. That's my own personal opinion. That is not the opinion of Clemson or any other thing that is affiliated of, so. But that comes back from my planning commission days, and those are those things that we used to have, and we used to have, when we used to do the master plan on making changes to zoning, because things change, and that's just what happens sometimes. And that was done every 5 to 7 years. It was open to the public, and we requested a number of individuals that, we asked people to come in, and we put individuals on groups and committees that were associated with very specific topics as part of this master plan requirement. And so we would meet as larger groups. Everybody would say, all right, here's what we're doing, here's what needs to be discussed, here's what we hope that the outcome will be. Meaning, we want your group to go in, figure out what is, prioritize, write down and figure out. And sometimes it took days, so it's not just, it didn't only happen there. All right, this was a year-long process. All right, what are the priorities and needs as it relates to this particular side, this particular group, this side type of zoning? And then it was up to that to begin to deal with, all right, here's what has come up. And then we have the larger general public opportunities to come in at any time. We had all these posters and maps and all these priorities, and they had their say on each one of those if they wanted to. And it was written, established, and then the planning commission in the end, with the help of our planning department that would summarize, put all this stuff together, create the maps, and would create some different options. And we would discuss with the attorneys and consultants and everything else, pros, cons, are there particular legal issues, all these other things. And then it was up to the planning commission to finally make adjustments if necessary. And of course, they were representing their group, so I was Aggie. So me and Rendleman, who was a blueberry grower, we represented the ag. And surprisingly enough, we had a pretty large developer there, and he kind of leaned more towards the ag side of things. And so that's kind of what we did. Was it perfect? Was it smooth? No, but everybody had a say.
And I think that is where, I think what he's trying to tell us is that's where ag, the farmers, not just this advisory board, but the farmers need to be paying attention, because the comp plan will be reviewed in 25.
It starts this year.
Starts this year, 24 to 25, because it was done in 20. Needs to be reviewed, looked at. That means pay attention to what comes up from the planning commission, from them, and I'm sure that, especially since that is taking place in your district and part in Rex's, that there will be things that come up, but that's where you need to be proactive instead of reactive. And I know Andy has done a great job, and I can't think of his name, I can see his face, Justin, and just need to make sure that they're there and that they're paying attention, because like we said, we know they want to farm, they have small children, we know it means a lot to them, but they need to have their ears to the ground and listen to what's coming up so they can have an input. Sure. And as far as with planning, so 2 things I think we need to vote on real quick. Again, thank you.
You are very welcome.
One is a change in the calendar to switch District 5 to March, leave everything else the way it is. I know we'll be out of here 2 months in a row, but I think that'd be the easiest thing to do. And move up the meeting of the roundtable. That's Josh's motion. I'm combining it to have the roundtable beekeepers, cattlemen's. Chris, you can chime in. I can't think you guys can on who else you want there invited for that meeting, and make sure we get some feedback from them. And, so that's the motion that's on the table, is to switch that and move everything here for February. We need a second on that motion, and we need to vote on that motion and discuss it.
I want to throw something out. I just sent a text to Chris. I said it might be worthwhile to have, maybe ask Chris, or I can help get a hold of him when you have the ag teachers come in,
Okay?
is to possibly have Mr. Troy Helms. And Troy, y'all may not know this, but ag teachers fall into different districts. And there is somebody that actually works for Clemson that has the responsibility to work with those ag teachers to help provide professional development and other opportunities, district by district. And the person that's in charge of that team happens to be Mr. Troy Helms. So he may have some other ideas that might be of benefit.
Can we make sure we invite him to the February meeting? Thank you for that.
You're welcome.
I think that's the connection we've been wanting to make sure, so that we can build on all of that. So,
If anybody has any questions or want to get a hold of me, I think my number.
It's on here.
Yeah, it's there.
Yeah.
Oh, it's the right one. Yeah, that's the right one.
Thanks very much for coming.
So, appreciate y'all very much. Thank
Thank
you.
you.
It's good to, I wish there were more groups like this in some of the other counties, so I'm appreciative of it. Thank y'all.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Thank you so much. Okay. So,
The motion is to change the calendar, switching District 5 meeting from February to March and move up the meeting of the roundtable to,
February,
and that's gonna be the same meeting as the one with the ag teachers.
yes, we're gonna invite more people,
Okay.
so we can, yes, so we can kind of hit the ground running. That's the motion.
Second?
Second.
Josh made the motion, or you made the motion?
Josh made the motion.
Okay.
Rex seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Josh made that motion about 30 minutes ago.
Yeah.
So sorry. He
I
was
started
trying to
it,
get
and then
He kept getting interrupted, so sorry. That was, Josh made that motion a long time ago. Sorry. The other part of the business is Tessa passed out, and I just want to give her the floor real quick so she can talk about, I think this is a great thing, this farmer's breakfast at Rocky Knoll Baptist Church, January 7th.
Yeah, so the Food Council is one of our initiatives. We want to get farmers together regularly to have an opportunity to fellowship with each other, share experiences, kind of build the momentum that we're trying to work off of when in regards to ag in the county. And every breakfast is going to have some kind of presentation, educational presentation about some program that might be available, funding that might be available, or personal experiences from someone who has been successful in their production. And so this first one is about the RFSI grant, which is specifically a South Carolina ag grant. And the funds are upwards of $4 million in total for the applicants. The first component is equipment, so you can apply for equipment only specific to processing, cold storage, transportation of any consumption-related produce or dairy. And then the other component, and that has no matching requirements, so you can just apply for it and you can get $10,000 to $100,000. And then the other one is for a bigger project, and that's $100,000 to $1 million per applicant. And that one requires a 50% matching to it, but a group of people can apply for this. Multiple entities can back a grant. But this breakfast is we're gonna give a presentation on best ways to apply, how to be successful, have a Q&A, so that we can actually get farmers applying for this grant, producers applying for this grant, schools can apply for this grant. So we are contacting the schools as well about this grant. Businesses can apply for this grant. pretty much any individual involved in that middle of the chain processing can apply for this grant. And so that is on the 17th. It would be great to see the Ag Board represented at this breakfast to keep that presence in any involvement with ag in the county. And we are trying to get the actual grant providers out here. We have a meeting with them this week to get them to come out and give the presentation themselves. So we're really, really hoping this gets some funding within the county for this.
That's awesome, thank you. And Tessa is the new chair for the Food Council, if you guys did not know that. So we look forward to assisting in any way we can, and I encourage everybody to attend. Chris, do you mind sharing that information? Do you mind letting them know that we would like to have him come?
Yeah,
And
that's no
then we
problem.
can send a formal invite
Yeah.
or whatever. But thank
No
you
problem at all.
for all your help,
No problem at all.
and I am so happy to hear it. So, if there's,
Just, with the public meeting, if you're gonna have a quorum of the ag board there, and if we wanted to say anything, advertise, have any kind of business portion of that, like, hey,
you need
come
to
to the ag board,
advertise it.
we'll need to advertise it, so, no pressure, but if you feel like we're gonna have a quorum, I'll go ahead and just do it, because we're gonna have to advertise the meeting schedule for the year anyway.
Let's just go ahead and do that. That way that will help Tessa, that will get the word out.
Yep.
And maybe for all of her breakfasts, so we don't have to worry about that.
Oh, yeah, if you've got that whole schedule, and then we can.
Yeah, we don't have the schedule, but we are planning on doing them monthly.
Okay.
But as they come, I can
Okay.
send them your way. And like I said, I'll send you this so you can send it out to the email list.
And then that way, if everybody, don't feel like you can't attend because there might be a quorum or something.
One of y'all might want to apply for this grant.
Are you doing some advertising other than the flyer?
I
Yes.
think that's great. Is there anything else? And I'll get us out of here in under an hour and a half. Sorry.
It's a good meeting.
That was good, yeah.
Motion, second.